I'm just going to start so we can roll through this. I'm going to try to be more awake, not complaining, not complaining about being here. That's really makes a bad impression.
Dancing fearless.
We're continuing on with the goal of knowledge. We're going to be looking at the goal of knowledge as far as how it relates to science. Section 8, a holistic science. Previously, we looked at the section 7, which was the practice of pure thinking. As we move on through the rest of the chapter, beginning with this holistic science, we're applying pure thinking. Pure thinking is a preparation for science because you can't do this work here that we're going to be discussing for the rest of the chapter without the ability of pure thinking. There are many regions of life. A specific field of science develops for each one, but life itself is a unity, and the more the sciences immerse themselves in separate fields, the more they move away from seeing the world as a living whole. It is essential to have a holistic knowing that seeks in the separate sciences the principles for leading man back to the fullness of life. The aim of the scientific specialist research is to gain knowledge of the world and how it works. The aim of this book is philosophical. Science itself is to become a living whole. The various branches of science are preparatory stages on the way to the holistic science intended here. A holistic science begins with seeing the world as a living whole. When you start having everybody specializing in a particular branch of science, it's going to be difficult to see the world as a living whole because you're just learning about one part of the world. What's recommended is a special field of holistic science based on holistic knowing. The specialized fields produce principles through closely studying a particular field. Then the holistic science takes these principles from all the various fields so they can work with the whole and study the interrelationships between the fields. For example, the obvious one is environmental, a holistic environmental view. Within architecture, there's a sociology element, there's a psychology element of the people in the building and use the building and how well the architecture fits in with the environment and on and on. I mean, everything is interrelated because the reality is the world is a living whole. If we're going to deal with reality, we need to deal with the world as a living whole. And it even applies to politics. Holistic politics would be to develop broad-mindedness. Take the principles from each of the political views, because each of them have principles that are of value, and working with all the principles when you start looking for political solutions. We're looking at a humanistic view because ultimately the value here is the fullness of life for the human being by taking a holistic view. A better environment, better buildings, better design of cities, better everything. We end up with a fuller life. Steiner takes a holistic approach to freedom. Within the book, he presents many points of view, creates a wholeness out of them. How each point of view throughout the book fits at a certain place and brings value to the idea of freedom. A similar relationship governs the arts. A composer works on the basis of the theory of composition. This theory is an accumulation of principles of what one needs to know in order to compose music. In composing, the rules of theory serve life. That is, theory serves actual reality. Philosophy of Freedom, it's a book of theory that is to be applied. Earlier, we discussed applying the principles in the book. Here, he uses an example of the arts as an application of theory. So this, in a sense, is science related to art. The composer learns the laws of composition and learns how to compose. And from there, they're applied to reality in the composition of beautiful music. So we're not really interested that much in just plain abstract theory, whether it's philosophical theory, spiritual theory, or whatever theory. The philosophy of freedom is interested in the application of theory, which is the basis of what ethical individualism is. Definition of ethical individualism is the application of the ethical principles, the ethical ideas that you have. It's to apply them to the world. So an ethical individualist is a doer who applies their ethics to the world.
Studying the music theory, I did that for 3 years, and believe you me, I have never composed 2 or 3 notes together at all. Doesn't matter how much theory I did, that didn't make me into any composer. So this is what the philosophy of freedom is. Pretty scary.
So you didn't write any music? Did you try?
No, I was just a kid at the time.
Oh.
I mean, you know, it went along with piano lessons, and then you did theory, but it was enough to be able to pass the courses, the exams, but there was never any intention to be a composer anyway.
So you could say that that's not a goal of knowledge, is to learn theory and then never apply it. Of course, you're young. We were taught a lot of things we never applied when we were young because we weren't really pursuing our own interests.
But I do think that people that really do feel this desire to compose, the most successful composers are the ones that have at the core, they have a really strong understanding of the way music works, and that they are the most free that really grasp those basic rules. You can break the rules or bend them or expand them when you know what they are. But if you're just emoting because, oh, that sounds cool and that sounds cool, you're not free. When, as a composer, the true composers are the ones who really get it and really know the inner workings of all of the complexities, and then they move beyond it.
Well, that's interesting, because as we move on to finish this chapter, the final point is we must be the master of ideas. That seems to relate to what you're talking about, is that you can bend and break the rules if you need to. If you're the master of ideas, because the ideas may want to control us. But let's move on. In the same way, philosophy is an art. All genuine philosophers have been artists in the conceptual realm. For them, human ideas become their artistic material, and the holistic method of science their artistic technique. Abstract thinking takes on an individual life of its own. Ideas become powerful forces in life. We no longer merely know about things, but have made knowing into a real governing organism, ruled by its own laws. Our actual working consciousness has lifted itself above a mere passive reception of truths. Now we're talking about a science of philosophy and philosophy as an art. You get into a science of philosophy when it talks about the artistic material are ideas, and the artistic technique is the methods of science. So if you look at the philosophy of freedom as an example, the ideas in the book, even though they come across as philosophical ideas, they're based on observations of human nature. The critical thing for ethical individualism is that these ideas are received intuitively in a way that they become very powerful forces in our life. They become impulses to action. And this is all tied in with what it says about abstract thinking takes on an individual life of its own. Ideas become powerful forces in life. We no longer merely know about things, but have made knowing into a real self-governing organism. So this is really a holistic philosophy. By entering pure thought into the conceptual realm, we connect all of our ideas together, and it becomes a living organism, which then guides our pursuit of knowledge. When we get new ideas, it builds on to this organism of knowledge. That living organism of knowledge speaks to us through intuition. We hear it when we get an intuitive insight because of the certainty that comes with an idea like this has the support of our whole body of knowledge. So it gives us a tremendous conviction because it's not just a random idea, it's part of our whole philosophy. So it's something that comes from the core of our being. It comes from something we really know. So that creates a conviction. So then it empowers our action compared to just some random idea or something. It has all this life in it. It calls it a real self-governing organism. And like I said, it speaks to us.